Hello, I'm Karen Jefford, and this is the 7+1 Framework Series. Step 2, story, sharing your story and why it matters. Once you're clear on who you are, the next step is how you explain why it matters. And this is the gap I often see. Many charities explain what they do, but not always why it matters in a way that connects and leaves people wanting to know more. Most charities don't lack a story, but they do lack, sadly, clarity about what they do, why it matters, and the impact it has because of their work. And so people are often left wondering why their story is not landing. So I want you to think about really about your story. Does it feel like it's connecting, or are you just sharing it? You know, does your team tell the same story consistently? Do your trustees use the same language? And would a corporate partner repeat your story accurately after one meeting? That's an interesting one. Alessandro, what do you think makes the difference between a story that's heard and one that actually lands?
Right. So since I'm going to also contribute to this second step, I always say that it's really, really important to think that the other person should not just understand your story, but also feel the story. Many, many times we focus more, how can I make the other person understand what I'm saying, rather than feeling what I'm saying. We just resonate with another person when we feel the story. Mm-hmm. So let me share with you maybe a couple of points that I usually suggest based on why many stories, they don't land with the other person. So the first one is to write the story from your audience perspective, not yours. It's the other person that is going to buy your story, not the other way around. Empathic marketing, as we mentioned in one of the videos, is about listening. So the more you listen to the other person, the more you put yourself in the shoes of the other person, and you become able to use the language, use the words that they use in order to make the other person feel what you are saying. So first of all is to write the story from your audience perspective rather than confirming your assumptions. The assumption of everyone can understand because I'm sharing what I believe. But people buy your product, your service, what you are selling, or an idea, rather than the other way around. You should not buy yourself. That is a very simple but not easy for everyone to grasp. The second reason why many stories, they don't land with the other person, because the story actually describes what you do in a very dry way, and they don't show the transformation. People buy when they see the transformation. The transformation, you can see the transformation or understand the meaning of a transformation like a journey. If you go on holiday, you have 3 main points. The starting point is where you are now, where the other person is right now. Then there is the point B, is the final destination, where the person wants to be, what they want to achieve, maybe their needs, their wants, their desires. But in order to move from A, where they are now, to be where they want to be, you need to think, what is the vehicle? What is the car that allowed them to move from A to B? So the more you show this journey from the starting point to the end point, and tell them what's the vehicle, what is your skill, what is your unique skill as like a charity, the more you make the person feel what you are saying. So the first point is to build from an audience perspective, not your perspective. The second is to show them a transformation from point A to point B, and see is the vehicle, how you help a person to achieve what they are achieving or what they want to achieve. And lastly, that I've already touched in point number 1, we need to use emotional language. What's the emotional language that the other person is using. And this is by listening throughout, for example, the empathic marketing. How can I put myself in the shoes of the other person in order to incorporate into my communication their language, maybe their analogies, their metaphors, something that they don't just make them understand, but they already feel part of your mission. There are any point, Karen, that probably really resonate with you, or any maybe questions from a psychological point of view that I can expand?
I think the key question on this one is how do charities actually make their story land? You know, it's not about what they do. It most definitely is the emotion behind the storytelling, isn't it? It's how people feel about their work and the impact that they've had. And I think that whole connecting, and people then start listening, you know, they hear part of the story, you've touched those emotions, they carry on listening, and suddenly the story is clear and it's meaningful. And I think that's the goal that every charity needs to get to, not talking about what they do, but it's making sure the emotions are heard and felt, so people understand the work.
In particular, many people ask me, but for example, let's say I'm a charity and I need to decide whether I need to show or verbally express the benefits or the cost of inaction. From a psychological point of view, people only act when something is painful. I usually give it the analogy of the vitamin and the painkiller. A vitamin is something that is good to have. You can inspire the person, but they don't feel now is the time to act. While when you craft your communication around a painkiller, if you have a very strong headache, you don't think, oh, let me think if I'm going to act in a month's time. You act immediately. So the more you understand that you need to balance the cost of inaction in terms of your communication with the benefits, you have this really good balance, where I usually suggest to skew more towards the cost of inaction, because people act just when it's very, very painful. But sometimes we also need to understand what is the emotional language that they use that allowed them to visualize the future. So it's more like the vitamin. It's something good to have, but we don't want to have only language that highlight the cost of inaction. So the balance between the two, and by listening, is where we learn. We can't guess what's the language. We don't want to assume. We want to listen. And the more we listen, the more we write, the more we understand how can we balance the cost of inaction and the benefit, the more we create an emotion in the other person, or a storytelling with a lot of emotions, which is step number 2, the purpose of step number 2. How can I craft a piece of content, whether it's a verbal content, visual content, or written content that resonate with the other person?
So with step 2, you'll actually get the expertise of both Alessandro and I. And after this step, you'll leave with a stronger, clearer narrative, and the ability to adapt your message without losing meaning or that feeling, and a story that builds trust and emotional connection.